You know that strange moment when the sun feels perfect on your skin, when the air smells like salt and money, and for just a second you forget that your phone exists, and then one vibration slices through the day like a blade. That was the moment everything changed for me. I was sitting on a teak lounge chair at a private resort on the Florida coast, condensation sliding down a glass of iced mineral water, listening to waves break with the lazy confidence of people who have never had to earn anything. My phone buzzed once. Not a call. Just a message. It said, "Enjoy your trip. Don't bother coming back." No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Just confidence. Cold, casual confidence. The kind that only comes from a man who believes consequences are for other people. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 37 years old. And until exactly 5 minutes ago, I was the lead platform engineer at a logistics startup valued at just over $100 million. Graham Keller, the CEO, had just fired me by text while I was over 1,000 miles away from the server room. He thought he was cutting dead weight. He didn't realize he had just triggered the kill switch on his entire empire. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone into the pool. I didn't feel embarrassed or panicked. What I felt instead was something colder and much clearer. The calm you get when a long equation finally balances. I took a sip of my water, set the glass down, reached into my bag, and pulled out my personal laptop. Not the company-issued one. That distinction would matter more than Graham could possibly imagine. I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, ignored Slack, ignored email, and opened a local folder on my hard drive. I had named it 4 years earlier with a sense of humor so dark it was almost superstitious. The folder was called, "In Case of Arrogance." Inside was the documentation for the one thing Graham never bothered to understand. The product everyone loved, the app investors drooled over, was called BrightRoute. It promised real-time synchronization across supply chains, drivers, warehouses, retailers, all seeing the same truth at the same second. Smooth. Seamless. Magical. Graham loved taking credit for that magic. He gave interviews about vision and synergy and leadership. But 4 years ago, when the company was nothing more than a desperate slide deck and unpaid interns, I built the engine. I called it the Pulse Sync Protocol. It was proprietary. Elegant. And fragile if mishandled. And here was the part Graham never read. I never sold Pulse Sync to the company. I licensed it. I opened the original agreement, signed when they were broke and terrified. I had formed a small LLC, Monroe Systems Access, just for this purpose. The deal was simple. As long as I was employed, they could use the technology royalty-free. Fire me without cause, and the license reverted immediately. Section 8. Paragraph 4. Clean. Precise. Ruthless. Graham had fired me by text. No cause. No documentation. No due process. Just ego. I glanced at the time. It was 2:14 p.m. on the East Coast, which meant peak operations in California. Thousands of trucks were moving. Millions of dollars depended on a handshake happening every few seconds between BrightRoute and my licensing server. I opened the terminal. I wasn't hacking anything. I wasn't deleting data. I was simply updating the truth. I changed one value. True to false. I paused for 1 second. Not out of guilt. I thought about the junior engineers. The support staff. The drivers who trusted the app. Then I reread the message. Don't bother coming back. He wanted me erased. I pressed enter. License state changed. Reverted. No explosion. No alarm. Just silence. Across the country, the handshake failed. The magic vanished. BrightRoute became a beautiful, useless shell. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the sun. To understand why I felt no guilt, you have to go back 4 years. Back to a converted warehouse in San Francisco that smelled like cold pizza and fear. Back when BrightRoute barely worked and users were fleeing by the thousands. I wasn't a founder. I was brought in as a contractor to stop the bleeding. I slept under my desk. I rewrote the back end from scratch while Graham pitched investors with promises we couldn't keep yet. One night, around 3 a.m, I showed him the working prototype. I warned him. This protocol is powerful, I said, but it's a single point of failure. We need redundancy. We need a backup the company owns. He smiled, patted my shoulder, and said, "Why do we need a backup? We have you." That was the moment I knew I needed protection. Not money. Protection. I'd been burned before. Built systems. Got erased. So when the time came, I insisted on licensing. The company lawyer barely glanced at it. Graham didn't read it at all. They thought I was loyal. Quiet. Safe. They thought I'd never leave. And for a while, I tried to fit. I worked weekends. Fixed crises. Saved launches. And watched other people take credit. A year later, a magazine photographed the founding team. I was told to grab coffee. My performance reviews were flawless on paper, but under culture, I was labeled distant, intense, difficult. I was difficult because I refused to laugh at bad jokes and ignore bad architecture. They wanted a mascot. Not an engineer. When Graham sent that text, he didn't just fire me. He confirmed everything I already knew. My phone began buzzing on the table. HR, legal. Then Graham. I silenced it. Across the country, the system was unraveling. Latency spikes. Mismatched routes. Duplicate shipments. The first public complaints appeared within minutes. I didn't need to watch. I knew exactly what the war room looked like. I knew the panic. I knew the blame. And I knew that somewhere, someone was finally reading the contract they should have read years ago. I opened my laptop one last time and checked the Monroe system's dashboard. Calm. Green. License reverted. Unauthorized access blocked. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect its owner. I closed the lid and picked up my book. Graham Keller had spent years standing on stages, telling the world he owned the future. He had no idea the future was rented. And the lease had just expired. If you think this story ends here, trust me, it doesn't. Because the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the sound of an empire realizing it no longer had a heartbeat. By the next morning, the ocean outside my balcony looked almost cruel in its perfection. The sky was cloudless. The water was glassy and calm. And somewhere 3 time zones away, BrightRoute was collapsing in slow motion. I ordered breakfast, buttered a piece of toast, and opened my laptop. I wasn't logging into internal systems. I didn't need privileged access anymore. I opened the public status page. At 8:31 a.m. Pacific Time, latency jumped from 40 milliseconds to 400. A hiccup. 2 minutes later it spiked again, this time into the thousands. I took a sip of coffee. The real-time sync, the heart of a $100 million platform, hadn't crashed. It had simply stopped answering the door. Inside the BrightRoute headquarters, panic was replacing denial. I could picture it perfectly. Engineers staring at red logs. Support lines lighting up. Managers shouting words like a reboot and a rollback at problems that didn't belong to software anymore. This wasn't a bug. It was an eviction. My phone buzzed across the table. HR first. Then legal. Then Graham Keller. I let them all ring. When the calls stopped, the voicemails started. Commanding at first. Then angry. Then bargaining. You can hear the stages of grief in a man's voice if you listen closely enough. I didn't listen. Instead, I opened my licensing dashboard. BrightRoute was pinging my server thousands of times an hour, asking the same question. Are we still good? The answer remained no. By mid-morning, social media noticed. Drivers posted screenshots of frozen routes. Warehouse managers complained about phantom inventory. One comment floated to the top of a forum thread, written by someone who understood exactly what was happening. Looks like they fired the only person who knew how this thing works. I smiled once, briefly. Inside the company, the narrative was unraveling. Graham ordered everyone not to mention my name. He called it a technical glitch. A cyber incident. Anything but the truth. But silence has a way of amplifying absence. Every engineer knew whose signature was missing. Every executive knew the question they were avoiding. And then someone found the slide deck. The one used to raise $40 million. It claimed full ownership of proprietary technology. No external dependencies. No third-party licensing. It was a lie. A documented one. That lie didn't stay buried. Neither did the video. Someone leaked footage from the boardroom. Graham, red-faced, slamming his hand on the table, shouting that he could replace engineers, replace code, replace anyone. The chairman's calm reply cut through the noise. If she's so replaceable, then why are we still down? The clip went viral. Investors noticed. Lawyers noticed. Regulators started paying attention. My phone buzzed again. This time it was the CFO, Miranda Cole, messaging me privately. We didn't know about the clause, she wrote. Is there a way to restore service temporarily? I read it twice. Didn't reply. Ignorance isn't innocence. 10 minutes later, HR emailed asking if I'd be interested in freelance hours to help with a temporary bandwidth issue. I laughed out loud and saved the email to a folder labeled evidence. Then legal tried. Smooth voice. Careful words. Offering a bridge agreement. I declined. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a contractor. I was the licensor. And the license was gone. Graham finally texted. Don't push this. You're playing a dangerous game. That's when I stopped being patient. I drafted a consulting proposal. $5,000 an hour. 20-hour minimum. Paid up front. No waiver of claims. $100,000 just to turn the lights back on. I sent it to the executive team. Graham replied instantly. This is extortion. I took a screenshot. Power had shifted, and he knew it. While they scrambled, I opened another folder. Years of emails. Tickets. Performance reviews. Warnings I'd sent about single points of failure. Messages Graham had written about building a paper trail in case I ever left. He hadn't just fired me. He'd planned to bury me. That was the moment I stopped negotiating for money. I called my attorney. Then I called the people who'd been pushed out before me. Riley, Marcus, Sophia. Builders. Quiet ones. I sent one message. Still building? They replied immediately. We weren't rebuilding BrightRoute. We were building something better. Ethical. Modular. Licensed with teeth. Respect baked into the code. While we sketched architecture, an email arrived from BrightRoute's largest competitor. They didn't want drama. They wanted stability. They wanted to license from me. On my terms. I said yes. Back at Bright Route, things got uglier. Engineers quit. Customer support walked out. And then Miranda found something worse. A shadow module. Installed without my knowledge. Scraping driver data. Selling it quietly. My protocol had been moving that data. When I shut down the sink, I'd unknowingly shut down an illegal operation. Suddenly Graham wasn't just arrogant. He was exposed. The board turned. The judge denied Graham's emergency injunction. The company offered a settlement. $12 million for my silence. I refused. I wanted 3 things. A public admission of wrongful termination. A restitution fund for the drivers and small businesses harmed. And Graham Keller removed as CEO. No parachute. They hesitated. Then the board called. They agreed. One last request. A bridge. Just long enough for users to export their data and finish their routes. I had already prepared it. A lifeboat build. Read only. No revenue. No tracking. A humanitarian corridor. It would go live the moment Graham's removal was public. At 5:01 p.m., the filing dropped. Graham Keller was out. The company admitted the licensing lapse. Apologized. I deployed the lifeboat. Across the country, frozen screens came back to life, not as a promise, but as an exit. Drivers finished routes. Businesses downloaded records. 48 hours later, the servers went dark for good. Graham called me once. Desperate. Offering partnership. Offering equity. I told him to download his contacts while he still could. Then I hung up. Bright Route didn't die instantly. It lingered, then sold for parts. The empire collapsed not with fire, but with paperwork. I signed a new contract that night. A partnership. Clear terms. Respect enforced by code. I stood on the balcony and listened to the ocean. 2 days earlier, that sound had felt lonely. Now it felt earned. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't sabotage. It was gravity. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told to smile while holding everything together, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're listening from right now. On your commute, at the gym, late at night. Drop it in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and stay close. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones holding the keys.